All right, everybody, huge thanks to all of you for showing up today. I have been on a mission to speak to as many people as possible about microservices, where their heads are at, if they're using them, what challenges they're having. I have probably spoken to, on average, 5 people a day in the course of the last 6 weeks. And I have spoken to some really amazing people, and many of you are here today, so thank you so very much. Warms the heart to know that there's other people who want to geek out about this particular topic and be involved in solving it. I am just going to go through some introductions. Wait, don't do that. Most of you have met me. I'm Tracy Ragan. I am the CEO of Deploy Hub and the executive director of our project here, our Ortelius open source project. I am not new to governance around open source. I've been on the Eclipse Foundation, and I am now on the CD Foundation. Steve Taylor is our chief architect. He was the creator of Deploy Hub. He and another individual by the name of Phil Gibbs, who is now on our technology oversight committee. They created it initially as a release automation solution. Since that time, we have kind of split the code and really focused some of its really cool features that we thought were really cool around monolithic release automation. When it came to what we were calling incremental releases, we realized that we were actually building a tool for microservice, and we just didn't know it yet. He has also does some contribution and sits on the Tecton meetings as as kind of a CD focus, and on his spare time he is a volunteer. He's the chief of the local volunteer fire department, so he is our local hero. We also have Marky Jackson. I am so excited to be introducing Marky Jackson as our community manager. Even though I have experience from a governance level from open source, I have absolutely no idea how to run an open source community itself. I have never worked or contributed to projects. I've only worked at the board level for these open source projects. So having Marky volunteer for this project has been an amazing, lucky turn of events for us. He really is, I would call, an open source guru. He is also the director of open source software at ObsumX, and he has been a contributor for many tools, including Jenkins, Falco, Kubernetes, Jenkins X, and Screwdriver. And he's going to talk a little later and introduce himself. So this is why we started getting into microservices. You know, it's not just the numbers of what this market looks like, but the market reflects where people's heads are at. Monolithic has been with us for quite some time, and everything we do is baked in it. But now when we shift to microservices, it means that we have some disruption that we have to address. And where we see most of the money going is not in how to make it easy to build applications and microservices. The money is in how to build out Kubernetes clusters. That's where everybody's focus is currently at, which means there's a lot of challenges at the application level. And this project is to make those challenges go away and make it easy to implement microservices. Just to kind of reframe the problem that we want to solve with this open source project, this is what a monolithic CD pipeline looks like. Everything you do in terms of software configuration management is done at the dev state when you do traditional CI, or even if you're not doing CI, if you're just compiling your code. The process of compiling and linking code and creating a package is indeed a monolithic approach that is being completely disrupted in a microservice environment. We no longer will have this smart person sitting in the corner worrying about what files to pull out, what files to compile, what libraries to link, creating our package so that we can carefully push it across the life cycle. That is going away. And in some respect, we're going to see even this waterfall approach, this dev test prod approach, go away in the coming years as things like service mesh become more prevalent. So instead of having a static software application package, we're going to take it and we're going to blast it into many little pieces. So the static application package is being broken into these smaller pieces, and that's what microservices are. So we still have to have a way of understanding what the application is, even though somebody's pointing to it and saying, hey, that pile of glass, that's your wine glass. And if you think about what that means, it means that there are microservices in different states of the life cycle, all being pushed out to be seen as a complete package. But we don't do that package anymore. It goes away. So we lose the logical view of an application, and there's no software configuration management done. So instead of having a static package, we have a dynamic and loosely coupled package. That is in essence what this new environment has created. And according to O'Reilly, only about 15% of companies report what they would consider massive success with microservices. So we're here to reimagine software delivery. And when I say software delivery, it's not just deployments. It is the process of progressing a change from inception to end user consumption. And returning to some of these critical concepts and applying those critical concepts to a modern architecture is what we want to achieve. So some of you have seen Deploy Hub. We are in the process of rebranding the Deploy Hub team to an appropriate Ortelius branding. But what we're doing with Ortelius is we're creating a centralized hub for putting the application back into a microservice architecture. We want to create a central marketplace for sharing and versioning service to their applications, which means that we could potentially grow this so that the way the SaaS environment works, it has something called a global domain. We could start allowing everybody to publish microservices to a high-level global domain that can be shared across organizations. Think about GitHub and the way that they have pushed the open source community to centralize their source code. We would like to follow suit and understand that that was an important feature of GitHub, and it can be an important feature of Ortelius as well if we open it up and allow people to share microservices. And then at the end of the day, our real goal is to create a simplified process for achieving business agility through a microservice architecture. And what we're finding is that while some people are really good at managing even up to 100 microservices, there's some core problems that they're running into that we want to understand and that we want to address. So how do we get the name? Abraham Ortelius created the first World Atlas. We thought it was a very appropriate name. We also wanted to stick with some kind of a nautical theme because cloud native, because of Kubernetes, has stayed there. And you know, what do we want to build? We really, I am pretty passionate about creating an inclusive open source project. About a year ago, I was at DevOps World and I went to a diversity lunch and I sat with mainly a group of women and 2 black men. And I asked the question, how many of you have ever contributed to an open source project? Nobody raised their hand except for one woman, and she said, I tried to participate in an open source project, but nobody ever responded to any of my pull requests, and so I stopped trying. And it made me sad. It made me sad that I've sat on a governing board for open source projects, but never really asked the question from a low level, who's participating in them? And we'll see that if we looked at the demographics, there are not a lot of women or minorities in open source, and we really want to change that. That's why I'm so excited we have so many people from so many different continents on this call today. We really want to create a common ground as well with experts from security, testing, infrastructure, project management, and development all talking about this problem. Not everybody has to contribute code, but everybody has something to contribute. We have some interesting people watching what we're doing. So we do have a technology oversight committee that we started even before Ortelius had its name, when we just started thinking about building out this project. We have Tim Kelton, was one of our first I would call them board members who really started giving us some clear direction on how this tool should look. He co-founded a company called Descartes Labs. Descartes Labs it's a Santa Fe company, recently became famous during the COVID pandemic because they have a way to track, they do a lot of AI and machine learning around mapping, and they were the first ones to start tracking cell phone, where you travel with a cell phone to show how the COVID can spread. Doug Orr is also a local, he used to be in Santa Fe, he's now moved back to Santa Cruz, but he was one of the original Kubernetes architects. He's now retired. He is a rock star in this industry, and I hope that we all get to have a meeting with him. He doesn't say much, but when he talks, everybody listens. He's brilliant and has given us a lot of insights on how to move forward. Since that, Phil Gibbs, he works for Bibby Financial. He also is he is on the board of our OpenMake software company, and he was he built what we now know as our domain structure. So it was his ideas to create a domain structure and to have things that could be independently deployed. Hank Hendrickson, I met as well in the process of doing phone calls. He's the infrastructure lead architect at BP, and he has an amazing background in just how companies have to, or the struggles companies are having moving to a digital transformation and a modern architecture. And then we have Tara Hernandez, who I'm a huge fan of. She is a senior engineering manager at Google. She's also on the TOC for the CDF. And Michael Galloway, who's also an engineering manager at Netflix, and he is on the board of the CD Foundation, and that's how I sort of recruited him. So those are the folks who've been part of oh, and then there's Chris Palmer, he does not have any pictures, and he's one of our end users, and he is in charge. He's what they call a DevOps program owner for Unisys. They were one of our first customers who really understood and started leveraging the use of a domain structure. And on that, I am going to pass it off to Marky, who will be your fearless leader in the future. I'll be talking a lot, but Marky and Steve will be really taking over this project from here.
Welcome, everybody. I am super excited to have everybody, as well as to get this kicked off. For those that don't know me, thank you for the introduction, Tara. I am super humble and a collaborative person. If you've seen me online, you know I like to have fun, and usually at my own expense. And I believe in having a truly inviting environment, making it very collaborative. So this is going to be something that we're all on a journey and we're all learning. There's no such thing as mistakes. There's no such thing as asking dumb questions. And trust me, I've already asked most of them. So that's what I've done. Getting started. We have two things that'll be of interest to you. First will be the GitHub repository, and that is at github.com/Ortelius, and then the Ortelius main repo. Myself and Steve are going through, and Steve's creating a lot of the work that's going to start off. I'm adding some of the good first issues, so if you go look through there, we can definitely get started that way. There is a lot of work to do. In the next slide, I'm going to show you kind of some of the work that we're doing. Before we go to the next slide, there's also our Discord channel. I do apologize, sorry.
No problem.
We have a Discord channel, and if you'd like to join that Discord channel, please do. That's where we'll be doing a lot of our async communications, so definitely join that. And the next slide, we'll talk about some of the work that we're doing. So we've got a lot on the roadmap. Full test for the hipster store example. We've got documentation scrub. There's the Spinnaker integration, the Ortelius Helm chart for Kubernetes clusters, Istio. I won't read through all of these, but you can kind of get an idea of all of the work that we're doing. Now, one of the things I'd like to point out about a lot of this work is if any of these areas are of interest to you and you have absolutely no idea how to do it, or you have a little bit of idea, or you are like an architect level person, doesn't matter. Please do not be afraid to ask to take on something that you don't know. I will speak for myself, and I think I speak for for Tracy and Steve, but I won't put words in their mouth. If you want to learn something, I am all about teaching people. And even if I don't know it, I love to learn together with somebody. It makes it a very collaborative sort of experience. So if there's something that's of interest to you on here, please do not hesitate to reach out and say, I would love to learn how to do Python, or I would love to learn to do data science for data visualization, or Kubernetes, or I'd love to figure out how to write a Helm chart. This is the time where you can get to learn, and it's going to be a sort of welcoming environment for you to learn. So don't feel like, oh, I don't know how to do that, so I'm not going to say anything.
Hey, Marky, let me jump in real quick. One thing that we're going to focus on as well is starting from the real basics as well. What is a pull request? How do you squash and merge? What's a good commit message? Some of those basics, if we get everybody on the same page, will help us down the road tremendously.
Yeah, this is I'll give you an example, especially of the squashing and merging. I've been a software developer for over 20 years. I can say that was one of my biggest stumbling blocks, was squashing and merging. And somebody actually showed me, they spent time to show me how to do it correctly. And that was so amazing to me, because even though I've been doing this for a long time, some of the basic things were, hard to grasp. And so I want to make sure that we're showing you that exact same thing, some of the true fundamentals of computer science, or even just how to get things. This will be the time to learn. So for those that don't, if you need to get a hold of me, and you feel like you don't want to ask in a public channel, my direct messages are open on Twitter at Marky Jackson 5. There's 5 in my family, so we figured just stick with the Jackson 5. You're more than welcome to reach out to me, and welcome aboard, everyone. I will, from here, turn it over to Steve, the awesome person, and take it away, Steve.
Let me get off mute here. All right, let me go ahead and
while Steve gets ready doing that, I want to add it. We showed a list of things we want to work on. If any of you have something that we should be working on, like we just added to, we're going to add to Deploy Hub and Ortelius probably a connection to console for storing key value pairs, because we're storing them, but we can push them over to there. So if somebody has an idea about that, bring it up, please. We want your input. That's part of the reason why I've reached out to so many of you. Your input is super critical.
So a lot of you have seen Deploy Hub at a high level. We're going to get into some of the processing that's happening behind the scenes. One of the things that we have here is a list of applications that have been created. These applications are actually based on a microservice application, the Hipster Store. So this Hipster Store is the one that we ship as part of the sample when you sign up for the SaaS version. And somebody hit us up on the Discord channel saying there was a problem with the sign up page. I should have that sorted out. I think WordPress module got updated on us on the back end, and kind of threw a wrench in that process, but that will get sorted out in the next couple hours. But the Hipster Store is a true microservice architecture application. It came out of Google as one of their samples. Each one of the containers, like the payment service, the load generator, the card service, are written in different languages. So if we go over to the GitHub repo, we'll actually see where the store is referenced. So anything that starts with store dash is going to be where the sample code is. Now, if we just pick one of these, I've been working with Circle CI lately, so this is where the Circle CI YAML code is for us to go ahead and do a automated build when we check in a change into this repository. That's going to go ahead and kick off and hook back into the deploy hub version here. So that's where we're going to get things automatically updating. That whole pipeline process is going to be hooked in place. When we talk about the integrations, some of the integrations that we have in place are like the Circle CI cloud build. There's other examples out here that hook into Jenkins. Like Marky said, one of the GitHub issues is to hook into Spinnaker as part of those processes. We have another one for Team City. So those are some of the integration pieces that we're working on that front as part of that process. You can see the Jenkins file here for the Jenkins cloud, the Jenkins build. So that's kind of pulling together what we have on that front. Let me get back to the right repository. Other things that you'll see out here are going to be the Ortelius docs. This is the repository for all of the doxy documentation. One of the issues that we created out here was to right now, when you check in, it'll build and create the container. We just have to get that container deployed out with Ortelius out to a Kubernetes cluster so we can host our documentation as part of that process. So there's some basic, some good first issues that Marky's tagged out here for us. Just things like a simple documentation cleanup, or if you want to be more involved in dealing with standing up Kubernetes and learning how to deploy with Ortelius out to the cluster as part of that process. All that is available for you. We are going to start one of the things on the roadmap is to take, if we actually look at the code base, we're actually going to take a lot of the code. It's pretty monolithic right now. Bunch of Java code here in this in the DM admin web. This is like the front end. So you have your Java code and your JavaScript code at this level. We do have C code, and one of the things that we have on that level is to remove the C code and replace with either like Python or Go. This is the deployment engine. This is the figures out how to do roll forwards, roll backs, keep track of what's being deployed. Is processed through the deployment engine at that level. A lot of this stuff we're going to start splitting out into smaller repositories and really take a microservice approach to Ortelius itself. Also, we'll be setting up, once we just got some money from Microsoft, so we'll be able to stand up a testing area, place out an Azure that we can actually work and do a lot of our productivity work with. As part of that, we'll be splitting things out into smaller, we'll have more repositories that we're going to be working with at that level, just besides the examples that we have going on. So if we jump back to Deploy Hub, if we look at what's happening on the components, every time we check in one of those samples, we actually go off and capture the information about it. And so we can see that this is a Circle CI. Depending on how we have the sample set up and what we have turned on or turned off, if we have, like in this case, Circle CI was turned on, where the GitHub cloud build was turned off, we can toggle those things by just playing with the switches behind the scenes as part of that process. But we'll be able to really have a good working demo to get us started with, and then we'll be using Ortelius itself to deploy Ortelius to the Kubernetes cluster as well as once we get that stood up. So it's going to be a fun process here. And there's a little bit of everything. If you're at the level of being an architect, or if you're an SRE, or if you're a developer, if you do documentation, if you just have, if you're an artist, those types of things. There's all sorts of things to do as part of the open source project that we're working on here. I think that was the main high-level stuff that I wanted to cover. Any questions that we can dive into?
Yeah, this is Christopher Hicks with Blue Shift, and I'm, am relatively new to Deploy Hub, and I guess we're all new to Ortelius at this point. But can you help me understand like what the current differences are between the two? And I'm guessing there's not very many, and what the direction of that is intended to be.
Yeah. So on the between the Ortelius project and Deploy Hub, let me go back and share my screen. So in the Deploy Hub world, we have a concept of releases. So that's one of the add-ons that we have at that level. And then also user groups in Ortelius, you have administrators, everyone users. And in our Pro version and Deploy Hub version, that's where we let you create any number of user groups at that level. Also, it gets into the domain structure and how the domain-driven design is actually laid out. A number of levels deep that you can go between Ortelius and the Deploy Hub Pro. The Deploy Hub Pro gives you more flexibility on how you can create your domain structure and organize your microservices. And then on environments, some of you may not have seen this because we don't typically dive into calendaring, but when we want to schedule out events and things like that, that is in Deploy Hub and not in Ortelius. So in the Ortelius code base, you'll see the calendaring code is actually not there. The release code's not there. The user group code is not there. And then there'll be more additional things that the Deploy Hub will add around visualization and along those lines, like difference reports, additional value stream type of data gathering that we're going to gather from interfacing like with like an APM side of the house as well.
Or tickets, Jira tickets, Bugzilla tickets.
I forgot about that. Change requests, those links. So it gets into more of the value stream from a change all the way out. So the core piece with Ortelius, we have the applications components, environments, endpoints, actions, functions, procedures, and then just some of the basics that are the underlying pieces. So like, and this gets into like notifiers and templates. Our current notifiers that we can use are emails, Slack, HipChat. We got a request for Microsoft Teams as another notifier to work with.
We need to add one for Discord.
Yeah, Discord itself. So that's the high level difference between the two products. So I would say about 85% of the code base is the open source of what Deploy Hub is based on. It's basically it's 100% of the code base that Deploy Hub is based on. Then we add another 20% on top of that. That help?
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's totally great. And it sounds like you're gonna continue to develop Ortelius, and that will be the place that new things are happening, and then you'll add a little bit on to make it Deploy Hub again.
Yep. And right now, I'm in the process of merging a lot of the UI code back down into the Ortelius project. They branched pretty far because we did a major rewrite of the GUI from the deploy up side, and now we're from the deploy ups contributing it back to Ortelius. And I should have that done by the end of the week, all the code merge. All the C code's good to go. It's just some of the UI stuff that we're cleaning up.
If everybody could just kindly mute their lines if they're not speaking.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, quick question. So going back to one of the first slides I saw on your roadmap, you had a Helm chart for your platform.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering why you chose a Helm chart as opposed to like an operator pattern or other alternatives that are out there.
The operator pattern is on the roadmap.
Okay.
So we just chose Helm because a lot of times you'll find from a Kubernetes abstract, people will choose to do the Helm easy deployment. However, it becomes down to, kind of what's your flavor. I do think operator patterns or, the CRD is definitely favored, but sometimes people want a very stripped down version of a deployment, and they'll choose a Helm chart because it's, from a security perspective, it's a little bit easier than an operator, which takes a lot of more from a cluster role. With
Sure.
a Helm chart, you can get away with, sort of service level abstraction.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. We're very immature in our Kubernetes journey, and we've used a few different tools, and we found that the operator pattern is super simple from what we've used so far. I was just curious what y'all's rationale was.
Yeah, sometimes, for some people in their organizations, they'll choose a Helm chart, again, just because it's easy to deploy, and they still want to have a lot more manageability from like an administrator perspective. But with an operator, you're more choosing the operator to do a lot of the
a lot of the work.
Yeah, so it's just a different flavor. And
yeah, a control ease of use trade-off. That makes sense.
Exactly.
And we'll actually need both of them. So both implementations would be so people can pick and choose what they're familiar with when they go to deploy.
Thanks.
Did you have also experience with a customize or kind of other, or did you try something else as a Helm charts?
No, not yet. We've been just focusing on mainly the Helm world right now, and we're open to expanding that into other solutions. That's one of the things here. We're not going to be locked into a particular language, or we're going to try to pick the best for the problem that we're solving.
Okay. So my personal experience is that Helm chart's quite good for big, long-running projects. So you adhere best practices, and for small, quick things, so perhaps a customize wins. So it really depends.
Yeah, because definitely. Again, it goes back down to like kind of what the flavor is. I agree with you. I think Helm and customize together is super awesome because you're able to use a lot of the underlying Sprig templates from Go templating. I think it's called the Sprig template. So yeah, there will be every flavors because just like Steve said, we want to make sure everybody has sort of an option to choose from. So you'll see as time progresses, you'll see a lot of these sort of like, we'll make a side little project where there'll be Helm and customize, and we'll do a meetup on it, and people can see how that works so they can get involved. And then we'll have sort of maybe just CRDs or operators. So yeah, you'll see a lot of that.
And a lot of it will come into play when we start breaking into smaller pieces. So when we start transforming the Java code base into microservices, we may have some that are around Go, implementing Go, other ones Python. It doesn't really, or Rust. It doesn't really matter. We just want to try to be somewhat consistent, just so we are able to not have to have a steep learning curve as part of that process. And then when we get into that, I can foresee that it's going to evolve on how we're going to be deploying Ortelius out to the Kubernetes cluster, whether we're going to be using Customize and Helm, or if we're going to be using Operator, or something new comes along that we want to try, we can do that. This is your project, and whatever we feel is going to be the best roadmap to take, that's where the working groups come into play.
And I just want to introduce Andre Chakran. He is an Apache person, so he's also a kind of an open source guru, and we're very happy to have him here as well.
Sorry to come in later.
That's okay. That's okay. Glad to have you here.
Steve, I have a quick question. So earlier in the slide, you've showed a monolithic project, what you have, right, which is written in C, and in R2, you were trying to like rewrite it in Python or Go in a modern language. So for any existing applications who want to use this tool, do they need to rewrite their code bases to the more modern language to kind of get full functionality of this product, or would there be any roadmap for monolithic applications to kind of break down and use the tool what we are providing here?
Yeah, let me share my screen again. I'll show you how that comes into play. So one of the things that is the beauty of Deploy Hub is we abstract everything into a component. So these are all my components. You can see like cart servers here. These are different versions of the same component. So as the Circle CI build process was coming along, we actually were creating new, so a check-in happened, we created a new version of the component. Now a component can be anything. It could be a file system type component, which could be a ear file that's going to get deployed out to WebSphere, or it may be a container of some sort that we're gonna deploy.
Could be a database update.
Yeah, or a test case component. So components allow us to have that level of abstraction, and then we bring together the components are packaged together into an application version. And so we have our domain hierarchy over here of where our components are stored, which domain that they're coming from, and we can then bring in that version of the component. It's a drag and drop right now into that version of the application. Now, if you're looking at a more traditional monolith application, and in this case, the hipster store is about 11 or 12 microservices that make it run. In a monolith world, you may have one or two components instead of many components. So Ortelius will go ahead and support a monolith world. It's just the number of components that we have associated to that application. Now, this is where one of the challenges is, if you look at this simple example, the screen gets pretty busy. This is where data visualization and comes into play, is when you have 200 microservices that are rolling up into a version of an application, how do you navigate that at that level? Laying out 200 or 300 microservices in a drag and drop world doesn't necessarily make it the easiest. It does solve its purpose of creating the relationships, but it's a scaling issue when you get into a large number of microservices.
And that is actually one of this good discussion we've been having with some of you. Go back to that, Steve. What you were looking at was an application version. But if you could go to that base version for me, Steve. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to, and Steve's already done some work in this area. We just haven't made it, we haven't published it because it hasn't really been thoroughly tested by really large systems. But we need to be able to create the base version based on interrogating a cluster. So, I mean, there's other ways that we can provide this. You could give us this data. A user could provide this data, the package component data, by providing us a list. We might be able to grab it out of a Kubernetes deployment file, but more than likely it's going to be in a cluster based on namespaces. So that is an area that we really need to start focusing on. Christopher Hicks, who spoke earlier, had asked the same question about AWS. So that is an area that we really need to be thinking about.
What will happen is once we have our base version and we know the relationships, we can then start maintaining, so if recommendation service keeps on getting updated, we know that we have to create a new version of the hipster store. So once we have our starting point, then it's pretty much behind the scenes self-updating when we get commits coming in and through the hooks from the CI/CD pipeline tool. So that's where that kind of comes into play, and we grab information from that point. But the starting point, like Tracy was saying, is what is our starting point? And we have some prototypes that we've done around trying to reverse engineer a cluster to figure out what is an application these days, especially when you have a couple hundred services in a cluster, and how are the namespaces related to each other, and which versions of the components, the microservices, are rolling up into which version of the application. Because one of the things when we look at it from a component perspective, if we interrogate a Kubernetes cluster, one of the things that we'll know is the digest and the tag probably, but we have no idea what the git commit is. Unless you write your Docker build file to push into the image, the git commit and the repo, that information is lost. So tracking back to where this container came from is quite difficult because nobody does anything consistently. So that's one of the things. We can get so far, and then we'd run into a wall. And once we have the image, the base relationships built, and then when we get information coming back in from the CI part, we can start mirroring things up and making the relationships more solid between the CI part and the deployment part.
We'll start having meetings on these particular technical topics so that we can dive down into them. So before it gets too late, I want to just do some basic, how we want, what the cadence of these meetings look like. And maybe, Marky, you can give us some ideas of how often we should meet and, what that needs to look like. And I get some feedback from the crowd in terms of what they would like to see.
Yeah, so I was giving some thought over this the last few days, and I was thinking we should have a general weekly meeting, and that covers sort of the project as a whole. We can maybe start by doing a 15-minute demo of a particular portion of the project. Everybody can become familiar with that, and then we can start in that remainder part of the meeting, we can start to cover, what we're going to be working on and sort of do it very stand-up style. If anybody's joined any of the other open source project meetings, you'll see there's like a general larger meeting. And then we'll see over time as we start to break into work groups, those will have their own meeting cadence, but they'll be sort of meeting back into the original figure we call it a contributor experience sort of special interest group. So I would like to see a weekly meeting, and then we break into work groups from there. And those meetings can have a different cadence if need be.
Super. Okay. And in terms of the time, is there a better time for doing a kind of a general meeting like we are now. Does this work for most people?
I think generally what we can do is I think this is a good time. It does cover a wide range of the world time zones. I do think that it may split into two meetings, so one that covers North America and one is more APAC friendly. But I will say that we'll probably send out a doodle to everybody so people can sort of vote on the time, and we can make it a very transparent sort of everybody selecting from something. We all know what we're all looking at.
Yeah, I find it's a very good idea. Yeah.
Great. And then we are about 10 minutes before, the full hour, and I want to respect everybody's time. So if there is anything that we haven't covered that somebody has a question about, just logistically, how to get to GitHub, I think that we'll be, as Steve pointed out, we'll try to do some of that training stuff. We'll probably create videos of that. We'll probably do this and create a video of things like how to navigate around GitHub. But is there anything else that we're missing that we should talk about?
To that point, Tracy, this is Eric Corville. The recordings in the weekly stand-up meetings that we are going to have, I suggest maybe like a YouTube channel where we could just upload those, and folks who might miss it have any.
Yes.
Eric is very well versed on open source. I can tell you that much. And yes, Eric, there will be a YouTube playlist. All meetings will be recorded, and there will be a meeting notes doc. So everybody will be able, if you can't make the meeting, you'll be able to refer to those.
Super. Thank you.
And one of the things from a logistics standpoint, we are working to get a Zoom account that's specific to Ortelius. So that will be available for people to use.
And we'll get a Ortelius YouTube channel created and get this first video uploaded to it. And then there is the presentation. Everybody should have received a link to the presentation, and we'll have also on Google Docs the Ortelius meeting notes. And so once those, I'll get those up there. I'll shoot everybody an email, and if you could go ahead and add your name as an initial attendee, since there's no way I can do it from here.
Marky, were you going to, I know we were going back and forth on the mailing list. Did you ever decide on how we were going to start on that?
Yeah, we're going to do a Google group. Initially, that may change as we see our community grow, because I know that Google is not used in some countries, so I'll be mindful of that. But the initial mailing list will be a Google group. And I'll have that by the end of the week, so everybody will see a way that they're able to sign up for that. And there will be regular notifications and things going out.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, gents and ladies, one question that comes up from your GitHub is there haven't been any releases yet. Is there a plan for like a 1.0 release or initial release at some point?
We have done, Ortelius has been released. We have not, the version that I was showing on the SaaS is at code slice on the SaaS version. So there is a version of Ortelius that we've released. One of the things that I'm doing right now is rolling back into the new UI. So if you go grab one of the containers from the Ortelius project, you'll get the old UI version. Like I said, by the end of the week, I'm hoping to have the new UI from Deploy Hub pushed down and merged back into the Ortelius piece. The C code's been merged. The documentation's been merged. It's just I have a couple conflicts on some JavaScript I got to deal with to push back down. And then will be the build process is in place to go ahead and build the containers to work with.
And in terms of a regular release cadence, Christopher, we will actually start to build that out, so you will be able to see what the release cadence is and how the release is done.
Okay, but I may have asked my question in an ambiguous way, and I should know better than using the word release in a group of geeks like this. But foolish me again. So really what I was talking about was a release in terms of GitHub, because people that are watching the repo can choose to watch it on a release only basis. And if people are trying to minimize the noise, I'm expecting they're going to do that. And so I understand there have been releases outside of the GitHub context, but is there a plan for doing it within the framework of GitHub?
Yes, when we go through, we'll create a release tag inside of the GitHub repo.
Cool, thank you.
And that will come about, you know, through the working groups and general meetings, that when we get, you know, to a point where we're going to be, like Marky was saying, we have a roadmap or a project plan that we're going to be following for, this is what's going to be in the release, this is our target date, and we'll follow that whole normal software development process, and that will tag the repository. But one of the things that, because we'll be moving towards a more microservice-based model, hopefully here soon, that will be doing much smaller, more frequent changes. So the concept of a big release is going to go away. You know, it'll be more of like, we've gotten to a point where we're going to start a whole new like feature that will go ahead and tag something, create a release, and branch off of that to allow that to happen. I mean, one of the things I'd like to do is to be able to you know, really get into a model where we're actually using like a service mesh and pushing new features like a beta feature out at the same time that we're running a production in the same cluster, based on, you know, routing and things like that. So that's one of the goals for me, is to down the road is to have, instead of a dev test prod type of world, a persona based world on what you're going to go in and work with.
So everybody there, I just put in the chat a link to the doc, and somebody test it and make sure that you can get to it, and add your name as an attendee. Make sure I put the right permissions on
I
it.
just requested access.
I shouldn't have to do that. Share.
Yeah, I have view only access.
Okay, let me try to fix that.
And while that's happening, what I would like to say is that, you know, one of the things that you'll find is that we're getting started with this project, and this is sort of a really awesome thing, because you have the ability as a contributor to this project to influence how that can happen, how certain things happen. So part of collaboration and open source is taking everybody's feedback, and we all decide on something as a team, as a sort of open family, if you will. So please don't hesitate to make suggestions, and we can go there.
Great. Looks like everybody has edit access now.
Yes.
Yep. Great.
Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns?
I would like for everybody to turn their camera on. I know there'll be a lot, but I want to see everybody. I know there's some women out there. There they are.
Hi.
Yeah, that's one thing you learn in the dealing with the open sources. You end up having your camera on just because it makes the communication a little bit easier when you can actually see somebody talking.
Makes sense.
Not only that, it's fun because I'm recording this for you know, this is the first day. You know, who knows where Ortelius is gonna go, but you know, it's up to us to decide that, and it's kind of exciting. New things are important and powerful.
Also, it makes you clean off the desk behind you.
Where are you, Tracy?
Yeah, Tracy, you're not on.
okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I think
I
there's
don't
a
know
few
why
more
yours were.
women. There's a few more women in here that are being shy.
Well, thank you everybody for coming and helping us out with the Ortelius project. This is going to be fun. There is a lot to do, but there's a lot of opportunities, and we're all going to learn something.
All right. Thank you. Everybody stay safe out there.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice to meet everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you for taking time. Have a nice week.
Thanks.
Thank you, folks. Bye.
Thank you for the introduction.
The best companies have transformed themselves from monolithic to microservices, and no doubt yours will be next. But what does that mean? And are you ready for the shift from managing a data center to a Death Star? Yes, a Death Star. With a modern architecture, you will have a Kubernetes cluster with nodes and pods running individual containers that execute a microservice talking via APIs. Take a look at these Death Stars running 400 plus services. The complexity is epic. So how do we navigate the Death Star? We should ask, where are our applications? Which version of a service is the application consuming? And the best question, who is using my microservice? With microservices, all the parts are loosely coupled. In addition, all the linking is done via APIs at runtime. In other words, microservice configuration management just became critical. DeployHub is a microservice configuration management solution that catalogs, versions, tracks and deploys independently deployable microservices to the applications that consume them. DeployHub becomes a central location or single source of truth, exposing service to application dependencies and allowing you to fully navigate your Death Star. DeployHub makes it easier to migrate to microservices and provide you the platform needed to manage them over time. For more information, reach out to us at request-info@deployhub.com. Thank you for watching.